Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Insurance Lounge with me, Tanya.
And me, Christy.
We are your local insurance agent out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we are here to make insurance a little less boring and way more useful for you because our goal is to share with you what we know so that you can feel more confident about your insurance, so that you can better protect your family, your home, your business, and of course, your financial future. So, with that said, Christy, what are we talking about this week?
Yeah, so it's really down to brass tacks now. It's back to school time, and what that makes us think of is all those young drivers getting ready to hit the road. So we want to talk to you today about things that you can do, things you should do to make sure that you're adequately covered, and some things that you could do to maybe help save you some money when you have a student hitting one of those milestones, whether they're just starting to drive or maybe even they're going off to college and, gonna be driving in a totally different place from you.
Absolutely. So it's a very exciting, but I'm sure for a lot of parents, it's also very nerve-wracking.
Well, speaking as one who's got one who's gonna start driving in just a few months, it is extremely nerve-wracking.
Exactly. So what we're hoping to share with you today will, maybe ease your mind a little bit. At least that you know that you're better covered. Maybe keep the costs in check, right? We don't want to break
Yep.
the bank because we know that's coming. Um, so first off, let's talk about what are some changes our customer or our audience can make to their insurance policy, Christy?
The first thing I would recommend is make sure that you're adequately covered with your liability coverage. They say when you put your kid in the driver's seat, you might as well put everything you own in the trunk because it's all at risk at that point. And it's just a fact. Young drivers don't have the same experience that we do. They don't make the same kind of judgment calls. They're more than likely to have, at least a fender bender, and we hope that that's all that it is, but, bad things can happen and they can get in some bad accidents. And people are so happy these days that, you know, they're very likely then to come back, the other party's very likely to come back on you and try to get something from you. So you want to make sure that you have that good liability protection.
Absolutely, guys. So just a really quick recap, right? So like the liability, that's the very first part of your auto policy if you're looking at
Right,
it, right? And it's really the part that pays out to the other person when you're at fault or your kid is at fault in an accident. So, make sure you talk to your agent, make sure you do some quick math, and whatever you have on your policy is going to be enough to cover your asset in
right,
the event of that bad car crash and in the event that that person choose to hire a lawyer and go after your asset, right? Um,
right.
and then also there, not just your auto liability, we also there is something out there called personal umbrella where it will go over your auto and your home if you happen to have a higher net worth and you want to make sure that all of that is protected. So
I always recommend for people when they're adding a young driver to a policy, consider an umbrella. I mean, it is an additional cost, but the protection and the peace of mind are just invaluable.
absolutely, absolutely. And, especially if you live in the area, guys, that when you drive out on the highway and you see a lot of billboards for lawyers, that just means it happens rampantly in your
Mhm.
area. So just keep that in mind when you have a young driver on the road like that.
Every third commercial on TV these days is for a personal injury lawyer, right? So,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. So now that we have other people cover, we want to make sure that your child is covered. So we recommend that you want to look into additional coverages that you can add on to your policy, right, Christy, if you don't
right,
already have it, because these are optional.
right, right. So, roadside assistance, I mean, just there's no way I'd put my child on the road, without knowing that they could call for a tow, if they need to. Or even, I know when I was a teenager, I ran out of gas more than once.
It happened. It
More than
happened.
once. Locked my keys in my car more than once. So there's a lot of things that roadside assistance can help with along those lines. I definitely would recommend that you have that for a young driver. And, possibly, do you need to have rental car coverage so that if they do have an accident and, you guys need to get something now that everybody in the house, you used to have that extra car maybe, right? But now that's the car that the kid is driving. So you might need to think about adding rental car coverage if there's not an extra available car in the household anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then besides auto insurance, if your kids who are going to college or who are already in college, maybe moving out from the dorm to
Yeah.
the apartment, a lot of these apartment, they will let you know though. They will let you know that your child needs a renter's policy, right, Christy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's just a given. They're gonna require it if they're in an apartment. And so many of the universities in this area, I know, have such limited, dorm housing. So very likely that at least past freshman year, you're going to be in an apartment rather than a dorm. So you want to think about, covering, and a lot of them will have, oh, here, we can cover you. We have a policy that will cover you, but you want to make sure they're probably covering their liability, maybe not so much your child's stuff. Right. So you've got laptops, you've got tablets, you've got maybe bicycles, things that are, of some value that you want to have protected. A renter's policy can be very inexpensive and help cover your personal belongings as well as that liability to the complex.
Absolutely. And then now that we're talking about a lot of adding coverages and spending more money on insurance, Christy, we want to make sure that you know that there are available discounts that are not like, more than our usual discount, like the auto home bundle, things like that.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but if your child is still in school, especially in high school, and they are starting to drive, you want to make sure you ask your agent about the good student discount, right, Christy?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nice little discount, well, from what I've seen for people. So, good student, like if they're going away to college, the student away is another good discount if they're not going to have regular access to your car any longer. That's a nice one to add on as well. Make sure that your agent realizes that, they probably don't know unless you tell them that your kid is moving away to college,
Absolutely.
so and, it's very little proof required, right? Generally, just like a transcript or a report card to
That's
show the
right.
students good grades and get that discount for you.
Yeah, and Christy, I really love the student away, especially when your child's not taking the car. You don't have to take them on and off your policy, every
Right.
time they come
Yeah.
home. Because the other thing you want to keep in mind too, and hate to break it to you, Christy, but college students are going to do what college students do, right? So even if you don't give your child access to a car and you take them off your policy, um, what if one of their buddies need them to be the designated driver or,
Yeah.
in a pinch, like, can you drive because you're the only sober one, like that kind of deal. So we don't recommend that you take them on and off like that because one, you really don't know what they're doing when they're away from home. But you
Yeah.
still want to make sure they have coverage if they were to get into someone's car to drive. So that good the student away discount is just a nice way for you to save a little bit of money, and yet your child will still have insurance if he
Yeah.
or she were to drive any vehicle.
100% agree with that. Another thing to consider to help save you money is a defensive driving class for a defensive driving discount. You can get this for yourself as well. It doesn't have to be just kids. I like defensive driving for kids because it helps them get to be better drivers as well. But, you can take some online courses fairly inexpensively, turn in your certificate, and get a good defensive driver discount as well. That's another good way to save some money.
Absolutely, and absolutely. And now we're talking about safe driving habits, Christy. We have all kinds of gadgets now, guys. So check with your insurance carrier because more than likely they have some sort of telematics discount either is attached to your car or is it simply something that you sign up on your phone, right? It's
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
simple, it's very straightforward, and what generally what these programs do is they track your driving habits, and you get a nice discount for safe driving. So,
Yep, yep. So, just it's tracking a few behaviors, driving behaviors, I call them, right? So, speeding, if you're going over a certain, miles per hour limit, phone use while you're driving. That's one of the reasons that I love it. I'll be able to tell it, when my son starts driving if he's picking up that phone. These kids are attached to their phones at the hip, but I really like it for that as well. What's the other thing that it'll generally measure? Like hard braking. So just a few things.
right.
Some people want to, tend to shy away from it because they don't want to get tracked. But my feeling is, if I'm carrying that smartphone around, I'm pretty much getting tracked anyway. So I might as well get a discount for it.
Absolutely, Christy. I think very few of us are immune to that, right? I'm pretty
Right.
sure we're being tracked 24/7. I'm sure my phone or Google knows how many times I go to the grocery store or how long I'm like
It
in my
knows how many times
bathroom
I go to
for, I'm sure.
Sonic for a Diet Coke.
Absolutely. So, what are some quick tips that we have for our audience? Like, how are we managing and how are we balancing between making sure we have good coverage, Christy, but then also controlling the cost?
Got to
Because,
make it affordable. Yeah.
yeah, cost for a young driver is quite expensive.
Yeah, it is. You can just go ahead and say it. It is. It's expensive. There's a reason that it's expensive. And it's like I said, they don't have the experience, they wreck their cars. But so one of the things that I really like to recommend to people, and nobody wants their kid to be driving around in an unreliable car, but to the extent that you can find something older, less expensive, that, maybe if it gets wrecked, you don't really care if it gets fixed. Let the kid drive around with the dent in the bumper, as a reminder to do better next time. You can do that and carry the car with liability only and not carry that collision and comprehensive. That can drastically reduce the cost.
Absolutely, Christy. And especially if you guys have emergency funds set aside that if the car is in a wreck um, and it's total, right? And your
Right.
child's at fault, then you actually have some means to put down for another vehicle, for
Right. Yeah.
example. I think that's a pretty good measure of thumb, don't you think? Like, where it's give you that
Absolutely.
peace of mind. You can keep the insurance costs down, but you know that you have a plan B if there were to be a bad accident.
Yeah, yeah, because that is the flip side of that coin, right? If you're not carrying collision and your child's at fault in the accident, you gotta be prepared to walk away from that car if it's totaled, so,
Absolutely.
um,
And I've seen
you need a
so
rainy
many
day
of
fund.
those. Yeah, I've seen so many of that happen, Christy, because the cost is a lot.
Yeah,
So I've seen some customer choose to do the liability only. But because they care about their child and they want to make sure they put him in a decent car that's not going to break down at the red light. And so they
right,
spend
yeah,
a good $10,000, $15,000 on that vehicle. So that's going to be a harder decision, right?
yep,
So
for sure.
unless you have the means to do it, you might want to you might have to pay for that full coverage that will cover the car if you
Yeah.
need it.
I usually recommend if it's a vehicle around about 5,000 or less, really, that's where I would really start saying, "Let's think about not carrying collision on this car." I mean,
Right.
that's my personal benchmark. Someone else's might be higher or lower, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
Right, right. And then what about having them getting their own insurance?
Yeah, that's definitely another way to go about it. Um,
But
you
maybe not for,
know.
like, high school when they're in high school, right? Like,
Well,
maybe
with
when they're out at, like, in college or something.
right, right. At some point there, I typically find there's kind of a tipping point where it does become less expensive to take the child off of the parent policy. It's not going to be when they first start driving and they have 0 months driving experience. But
No.
once they've got a couple of years under their belt and they're getting more like 21, 22, they're that's a good time to look at it and see if I take them off, put them on their own policy, even if I'm still paying for it, I it does 2 things, right? So it might help save you money, but it also separates your liability from the child's liability. So that's another nice thing for a parent who might be considering, whether their child is the best driver in the world or
You're
not.
right. Yeah, and I do talk to some parents that, do want to teach their children that sense of responsibility. And so they encourage their child to go out and buy their own vehicle, registering it in their own name. If you can, if your child can do that, we do recommend that, right, Christy? Just to keep the liability
Yeah,
separate from all of your hard-earned asset. Especially if you're worrying about the cost and you don't want to purchase an umbrella policy, things like that.
for sure.
But
Yep,
we highly recommend that. Even if they go out on their own and they're like a young adult, like in college or about to graduate, guys, like we do recommend just keep things separate. Even the
absolutely.
registration, just take your name off of that.
Yep.
That
Starts
way,
helping them build a credit history. There's lots of, things to consider that might be a good reason to do it.
absolutely, absolutely. And do you remember the first time when you were on your own, I guess, or
Uh,
start driving?
well, let's see. First of all, we can start with the first car I ever got. I'm pretty sure my parents were carrying liability only coverage on that car. It was a 1969 Volkswagen Bug. It was as old as I was. So now just totally gave away my age there, but, um, I didn't know anything about it at the time, right? But looking back at it now, I'm like, yeah, they paid about $500 for that car, and they were not carrying collision on it. But here's a, a great story, and I think about this all the time now as an agent and in how I treat people. The first accident I ever had, once I was, like you say, an adult on my own policy, living separately from my parents. And I was driving nighttime-ish, not, super late, but it was night. And the lady in the lane next to me crossed the lane and just kind of rubbed the side of my car. So it wasn't a terrible accident, but I was freaked out. I'd never had one before. Um, I called my insurance agent the next day. That evening, he came to my house. Actually, no, he didn't. He said, "Come to my house." I knew he was his wife and I actually were friends. So he said, "Bring the car over." I brought the car over. He got out a little buffing rag and just cleaned up the side of my car and said, "See, it's nothing. You don't even need to file a claim. You got no damage here. It was just some
Oh,
scuff marks." It was the nicest thing, but I think about that now all the time when I'm, deciding whether or not to go the extra mile for people. He really went the extra mile for me.
that's awesome. And I think that's why you and I always talk about making sure you're having a good agent. And I think that's really
Mhm.
important as well that your child, especially once they start going to college, to make sure that they have your agent's information and that they can
Yeah.
call and text the agent anytime if they had an accident like that, or they need help, or they have a question about their bill or
Yeah.
discount, they can just communicate with you directly. I have the opposite experience,
Oh,
Christy.
no.
Yeah, when I was a young driver. So I got into a car accident. It was pretty bad and I was at fault. So of course I was bawling my eyes out and telling the police how my parents were going to kill me, and he said no. He was laughing. He's like, no, they're not going to kill you, and I'm all over here crying. I didn't have an agent I could call. I called the agent who set up the policy for me, and he just told me to call the 1-800 number in the glove box. And so it was really, it was not a good experience for me in my first accident. And, like you, that experience is actually what fueled me to go the extra miles for my customer because I was there. I was a girl that freaked out in a, fender bender that did not get the help that she needed and quite
Yeah.
felt quite lost really. Long story short, I didn't even have any body shop recommendation. So I just took it to wherever. So there was unrepaired damage. After I want to say like 2 or 3 years, my paint start peeling.
Oh,
So
that
yeah,
is
so it
really
was
too
really bad.
bad. Yeah.
So yeah, so I looked like a mess for a long, long time. Um, but that was, that's my story why I want to do the right thing for my customer and and help whenever I can. So
Yeah.
we share a lot of good tips today. We gave our audience quite a little bit of information today, Christy.
Yeah.
So let's do a quick recap for our audience.
Sure thing. So, first of all, update your protection. Make sure you have the right level of liability coverage and the right types of coverage in your policy.
Absolutely. And make sure you have all the extra coverages that your child might need that is not currently on your policy, like rental car expense or roadside assistance if they need a
Right.
tow.
Yep. Look into ways to save money with different discounts that are available for good students, students away at school, defensive driving, we talked about, and also telematic programs that measure your driving behaviors.
Absolutely. And make sure you ask your agent about that, right, Christy? Because those discounts are going to vary from state to state, from insurance
Sure.
company to insurance company. So check with your agent on that. And then lastly, we talk about some really cool tips that parents can save money on. So the first thing we talk about is, either have a higher deductible or if you can get away with it, do an older vehicle and have just liability only on that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the other way to really look at saving money once they get to a certain age and with some driving experience under their belt is maybe by separating them onto their own policy. That you might even still help pay for, but it does start to, build a good credit and insurance history for them, separates their liability from yours, and really starts teaching some responsibility.
Yeah, and just be sure if you have an awesome agent or a personal agent like myself or Christy, make sure that your child has contact information for the agency and they know who to call in case they need to use insurance in case of an accident, or maybe they need to get the agent the good grades or something like that to keep the
Right.
discount on.
Yeah,
So that way you have that personal touch. You know that your agent is not just looking out for you, but they also know to look out for your child.
you got it.
Awesome, guys. Well, we hope that you got good information out of this today. We hope that it prepared you for this journey to see your child growing up, starting to drive, and leaving the nest to become their own adult. Um,
I'll
until
say a
next
little
time.
prayer for them if they'll say a little prayer for me. We're all gonna hit this milestone together.
Absolutely, guys. So until next time, we'll see you then.
Peace out.